This is an event that my mother told me about, and probably why I never really questioned if spirits were real or not. A little backstory to set up what happened. My mother and father owned one of those Airstream-type mobile homes in the 1950s. Dad worked construction and they would go to wherever he was working at the time. My oldest brother was 4 then, and my second oldest brother was 2 months. My mother, 23, and a stay-at-home mom. She had put the boys down for a nap and she was washing dishes. She said that she suddenly smelled a very familiar fragrance. First she thought it was the roses my dad had bought her a day or 2 before, then realizing that it wasn't. What it smelled like was her grandmother's perfume. She had a growing feeling that someone was behind her, and she turned around to look. She always had a hard time describing what she saw, as it was not like seeing an actual person. It was in her mind's eye. She knew immediately that it was her grandmother. There was a person on either side of her, but she didn't know who they were. A little more backstory now. My mother was raised by her dad, who was a trucker and not home much, and her stepmom, who was physically and emotionally abusive. Her grandmother tried to do the best she could for my mom, to help her survive her childhood and let her know that she was loved. Mom told me that her grandmother had a heart of gold and would help anyone that she could. Even during the Depression years, if a homeless person showed up looking for work, she would find something for them to do to earn money. Even if she didn't need anything done, she would always make sure the person had at least had a good meal before they left. At some point during their lives, Mom and her grandmother had discussed what happens when we die. They made a pact. Whoever passed first would somehow find a way to let the other one know if we continue on after we die. Mom and I also made the same pact many years ago. Mom saw her grandmother with a person on each side of her. Her grandmother told her, telepathically, there is indeed life after death. The 3 figures had arrived from the northwest and exited the home on the southeast side. About an hour later, she received a call from a family member letting her know that her grandmother had passed about an hour before. There's no doubt in my mind, there's definitely something beyond our time on this earth. From a young age, my family house had provided a number of strange experiences. I would see things, usually animals, running around or often flying. Sometimes I would see scary faces in the walls, but most distinctly when I was alone, I felt an overwhelming feeling of being watched and a sense of dread. As I grew older, it got worse. I started seeing people, hearing what would sound like a crowd of people talking. I awoke one night to see a skeleton dangling from the corner of my room and hear this crowd laughing. At times I even began to see it during the day, silhouettes in lit door frames just staring. Every time I'd open a door, I'd fully expect to see a person. I just never shook the sense that I was alone. As I got into my late high school years, despite my religiosity, I took a skepticism to it, assumed I was seeing shadows in my eyes or just hearing things for no reason. However, I moved out to a college and stopped having any such experiences. I started to sleep better. The dark didn't concern me at all anymore, and I never so much as saw a shadow move in the corner of my eyes. When I moved home for the summer, the experiences would pick right up again, however getting worse and worse. One night I was playing guitar and singing in my room, and I abruptly stopped because I heard a very loud, husky breathing right outside my door. That night was one of my worst. I tried to leave the home, drive somewhere, but as soon as I left, I felt as if the trees were watching me, and I felt this strange urge to come back to the house. When I got back home, I saw eyes staring at me from the backyard, but when I looked, there were no animals in sight. Cats often drift in our yard, but I got into my room and started praying and boldly proclaimed that whatever spirit lurked there had no power over me. I felt a distinct shift, as if something threatening had been walking toward me and then stopped, and was just watching. I graduated college and moved home. I had stopped attending church for years in college, not a loss of faith. I was having a really rough patch, and had begun attending an Anglican church in the area, developing a close relationship with the rectors there. I hoped with constant prayer I would banish whatever lurked in my house, but the experiences kept coming. I awoke one night to see a strange creature crawling on my ceiling before it dashed into the walls. Another night, my alarm clock app records snoring and heavy breathing, and I listened to one sample and heard very, very distinct whistling at 2 a.m. I'm on the bottom floor alone, and no one in my family really whistles. I immediately took to my rector, who proposed we do some sort of exorcism. After consulting with the bishop of our diocese, he came over to my house and performed the Anglican house blessing rite, anointing the doorways with oil, blessing each room in the house, and then praying specifically over me and praying to banish whatever spirit dwelt in the house. Immediately upon finishing, the house experienced a mood shift. It felt happier in the house. I had not had an experience since then, and I have hardly heard so much as a creak from the house. Since most people ask if anyone else in my family experienced anything, I spoke with my parents about it. They did not remark experiencing anything like that in the house, although they posited there had been very dark situations filled with a lot of hate directed at my parents. My dad is a conservative sociologist, which is a great way to make enemies since the field is extremely left-wing. I haven't yet asked any of my siblings if they have experienced anything. My other siblings had all moved away. The history of the house is pretty unknown. The guy who lived here before my family was very disliked by our neighbors, so it's possible he was doing some creepy stuff. That's my story. It's been interesting to be able to share it with people and then hear their own stories and experiences. Some don't believe, but I've been surprised at how many people, including irreligious people, have related to my own experience. When I was 20 years old, I was finishing up getting my second degree at a local community college. Since I was a full-time student and had recently undergone my second back surgery, I was temporarily living with my parents. I needed help physically, so I was extremely grateful to have such an amazingly supportive family. During this time, I was researching a lot of different spiritual paths and also became extremely interested in sacred geometry. It was fascinating to me how these patterns seemingly comprise our entire universe. One hot summer day, my older brother had called my mom to inform her that he and his girlfriend of over 3 years had broken up. She was keeping the apartment that they had rented together in a nearby city. He wasn't able to make any arrangements to find a new place, so he decided he would move back home until he could find something else. I was sorry to hear about his relationship ending, but happy that we would be able to have some quality time together. On the evening before he was set to arrive, I had gone to bed like any other night. I have always been a very deep sleeper, so I was surprised when I was jolted awake a few hours later. Directly in front of me was a glowing orb about the size of a baseball. It appeared brighter than the sun, yet it didn't hurt my eyes when I stared at it. Despite being in awe over its ethereal beauty, I couldn't shake the sensation of crippling dread. My mind kept telling me, "This is God. This is God," despite my not being particularly religious or even believing in God in the traditional sense. Even so, if there was such a higher power, I had always imagined that encountering him or her would be loving and peaceful. Unfortunately, this experience was the exact opposite. I trembled in fear while feeling incredibly intimidated and powerless. Was I dreaming? I couldn't be. I was sitting up and looking around my bedroom, which was illuminated by the orb's glow. It all felt so vividly real. Suddenly, the ball of light then spoke to me with a voice I could hear clearly, a sound which I will never forget. The pitch was deep, brassy, and powerful, masculine but somehow different from a man. He was incredibly eloquent in his speech and told me, "People whom you love are going to die." Now I was even more terrified. I shook in terror with an overwhelming sense of helplessness. In my mind, I asked myself, what can I do to save them? The orb must have known my thoughts because he responded out loud, "You must accept this. They must succumb to their fate and you cannot interfere." Once he spoke those final words, I felt myself leave my body and my vision was filled with flashing scenes from around the world. Every few seconds there was a new image. At first they were picturesque, A mountain range in the desert, monks in bright orange robes, a woman giving birth, the Egyptian pyramids. Then it took a drastically dark turn, and I was shown starving children, animal abuse, war, and atomic bombs. After what seemed like annihilation of the planet, everything went black. Appearing atop the darkness were complex mathematical equations and intricate geometric patterns shifting kaleidoscopically. That morning I awoke with no recollection of the events that transpired mere hours before. It was a normal day. I went to a summer semester course, ran errands, and picked up some things for dinner. Around 6 that evening, I was in the kitchen preparing food while feeling excited that my brother would be home any minute. Riders on the Storm was playing on the radio as my brother walked in with my mom. My dad, who had previously been on the phone in his office, came out and asked my mom to come see him. What followed was a bone-chilling and gut-wrenching scream. As soon as that sound hit my ears, all the memories of the orb flooded back into my mind. I knew something was horribly wrong. My parents entered the kitchen and proceeded to tell my brother and I something utterly horrific. Our relatives had died in a tragic motorhome accident. While they were driving down the highway, a front tire had blown out, which caused the propane tank to explode. In a matter of seconds, their vehicle was engulfed in flames. My great-aunt had been a quadriplegic since the 1980s after a botched operation left her paralyzed. My great-uncle had tried to remove her from the vehicle, but the fire had spread too quickly. Neither of them made it out alive. She and her husband had been married almost 60 years and were still completely in love and inseparable. They really were amazing people, the type of couple where one could not live without the other. When the authorities retrieved their bodies, they discovered that they had died in each other's arms. Years later, I am still perplexed by this entity who warned me of approaching death. I have had many strange and unexplainable events happen throughout my life, but this one haunts me the most. I have no idea who or what that orb was. Another important thing to mention is that I was not under the influence of any drugs or alcohol. The reason I am sharing this story is in hopes that perhaps someone knows more about the type of being that I encountered. I am an atheist and I have always been skeptical of the paranormal. Aside from being the most disturbing thing I have ever experienced, this encounter has turned my model of reality upside down. I was on the bus with my friend Veronica at around midnight. One of us mentioned that I was headed to Waterfront. She made a joke about how we shouldn't talk about where I was going on the bus because I would get stalked. I laughed and joked about that a little too, but I felt slightly uneasy. This is where I believe the experience began. I remember there was barely anyone on the bus. I saw 4 men chatting in front of us. Not that it's important, but for accuracy's sake, 2 men were talking to each other, and a short distance away, another 2 men were chatting. At the time that I am writing this, a few hours after it happened, I don't remember seeing anyone else in that bus. I got off the bus, and Veronica walked me to the SkyTrain station. I remember paying for my ticket and calling her as soon as I paid to jokingly complain about the fact that they had raised transit fare by 5 cents. We chatted for a bit. I went down the stairs to the platform for the SkyTrain to Waterfront, and a girl was sitting about 15 feet away from me. I immediately recognized her from the bus, though thinking back, I can't recall actually seeing her on the bus. I don't know how she got from the bus stop to the SkyTrain station without me seeing her on the way, but I didn't think to question that at this point in the story. From what I can remember, she looked about 9 to 15. Keep in mind, it was past midnight and she was alone. She was small and slim and her hair was cut in a perfect gray bob. It looked more like a shiny, hard gray helmet than hair. If it wasn't a helmet, it must have been a wig. I don't remember anything about her facial features or clothing, despite the fact that I only saw her a couple of hours ago, and at one point in the story, stared at her intently for 15 minutes. I do remember she had an alternative sense of style, and I think she was wearing either a leather or denim jacket. I stayed 15 feet away from the bench she was sitting on. Something about her was disconcerting and made me mildly uncomfortable. When the SkyTrain came, instead of walking through the doors of the SkyTrain compartment straight in front of her, she walked the 15 feet to get into the same compartment as me. I remember feeling a little weird about it. I didn't look at her while I was on the SkyTrain at all. This is where it gets weird. After the SkyTrain pulled into Waterfront Station, I got off it to get onto the C bus. When the SkyTrain arrived, the C bus was leaving in 20 seconds, so I had to run to catch it. Only one other person was running to catch it with me. When I sat down, the girl with gray hair was sitting a few rows across from me, staring straight at me. I immediately recognized her. I don't know how she got to the C bus from the SkyTrain station within 20 seconds before me without me seeing her. As soon as I saw her, I went from relieved that I had made it onto the C bus to being on the verge of tears. This is the part that makes me cry when I think about it. Her eyes were completely black. Her facial expression was inhumanly blank, like a robot, and she was staring straight at me. I'm not exaggerating when I say it wasn't human. It was so wrong and unnatural. I've never seen or experienced anything like that in my life. All of a sudden, its face stretched into the most horrifying, evil smile. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. I cry every time I think about it. I was holding back tears at this point. How did it get from the SkyTrain to the C bus without me seeing it? The C bus takes 15 minutes to get to the other side of the water, so I watched it for that 15 minutes. I could not have hallucinated it being there for 15 minutes straight. It was physically impossible for it to get from the same SkyTrain as me to the C bus without me noticing it at all. I may have hallucinated the eyes and the smile, but I don't think it's possible that I hallucinated them for 15 minutes straight. But I could not have imagined her sitting there on the C bus for 15 minutes. When the C bus pulled up, I waited to get off at last and didn't see her on my walk home, though I was beyond terrified for the entire walk. The more I try to remember its physical appearance, the more hazy it gets. All I really remember is the helmet-like gray hair, pale skin, black eyes, and the blank stare morphing into the most disturbing smile I've ever seen. I remember it was dressed in alternative clothes similar to mine, and what's creepier is that my hair is gray too, almost like it was mimicking my appearance. It totally lacked the thing that makes humans human. It even lacked the thing that makes animals seem alive. It was unnatural. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. This is incredibly scary to me because if this was real, what else is real? And why was it following me? What does it want? I played it over and over again in my head since it happened to me a couple of years back. Told my mom about it the night it happened. I literally ran upstairs and burst into her bedroom at 3 a.m. to tell her. But other than that, I've never told another person. So I had been working weird hours for a few months. I think I was working until 12 p.m. and sometimes beyond 1 a.m. So by the time I made my way home from work, it was getting pretty late. Right off the bat, it was a weird night. One of my workmates dropped me off around the corner from where I live, as usual, and as I start walking down the road and go to turn into my street, I'm greeted by 5 police officers and one of my neighbors, and I see my entire street is cordoned off with police tape. You can't enter the street. There's been a shooting. A man is critical in the hospital and we have a forensic and ballistic team combing the area. I don't think any of this shooting business is related to what happened next. I'm just filling you guys in on my night. So anyways, after 2 hours of smoking cigarettes with my neighbor and bitching about why we can't walk the 30 yards into our homes, the police finally wrap their stuff up and tell us we can go home, which was about time. It was closing in on 3 a.m. at this point. So anyways, I open the front door. My 2 dogs go nuts as usual, and once I calmed them down, I decided to have an ice-cold beer to take the edge off after a hard day's work. I tended to have 2 beers most nights after work to calm my mind. I work in a very noisy woodwork factory, and at the time I used to smoke and regularly chug down cups of coffee to keep me alive during the shift, so I'd always be wide awake when I got home, even though it was bedtime. I cracked my beer open and put it down on the far end of the kitchen table as I started to turn the TV on that's mounted on the kitchen wall. Then I flipped the lid up on my laptop at the other end of the kitchen table, and I finally sit down. 15 to 20 minutes passed while I browsed the internet and flicked TV channels. When I suddenly remembered, I opened a beer, which I'd completely forgotten about. I said, "Oh crap," out loud because I hate letting beers go warm. The very second I looked at the can of beer after remembering about it, an untouched full 1-pint can of beer, it started quickly sliding towards me, from one end of a 6-foot-long table to the other, and once it reaches me, it turned right and stopped directly next to my left hand and laptop. Think a big L shape of movement. The beer slid about 5 feet down and then 1 foot across until it touched the back of my left hand. I completely froze, just sat staring at the beer in shock for about 15 seconds with my heart pounding until my brain registered what had actually just happened. That's when I just bolted up the stairs and burst into my mom's room shouting, but it was like 3:30 a.m. and she was so tired and angry when I woke her up that she basically didn't care, which is understandable. I did just burst into the room like a maniac and scared the crap out of her. Obviously, I checked the table and for any other plausible explanation, but it's impossible. The beer shot towards me and across to my hand in a way that could only be described as somebody forcefully dragging it across the table. It makes me freak out a little every time I think about it because I still live in the same house, and I could vividly replay it all in my mind like it's a video recording, the can shooting towards me. I was a full-on skeptic prior to this experience. I own my own snow removal company that I operate during the winter, and I buy and sell cars during the summer and winter months. I also part out cars if they are beyond repair and are high-end cars. Makes it worth my time. I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but if you have a car and someone, say, gets shot in it or they get maced, it will almost always be totaled by your insurance company because it will cost more to have a crime scene cleaning company clean it than hire someone to replace the interior, so it's deemed safe again. A federal law exists that requires cars to be cleaned professionally before being worked on by a shop as to not expose workers, say Ford, they're fixing the interior, to the AIDS virus, HIV, herpes, and all that good stuff. Say hypothetically you get shot in your car. You are okay, but your car has blood in it, or you get into a crash and someone bleeds in the car. It will likely be totaled depending on the amount of blood and where it's located. These cars are sold by private contractors that the insurance company hires to take all its totaled cars and get as much of their money back as possible by selling them to other companies and individuals like me. Now, after that car that someone got shot in is sold, it can be cleaned amateurly and resold without having to involve any crime scene cleaners because no worker is being exposed. Stupid law, I know. I have family in law enforcement, and I've learned how to clean up blood and contain it fairly well by watching crime scene cleaning companies and asking them questions. Some of the cars someone had been murdered in, either by an individual, the police, or they committed suicide. I bought more than a few cars someone had obviously been killed in and sold the parts, or in one case, cleaned it and resold it. In January of 2015, I bought a 2007 Ford F-350 King Ranch for a song and dance online and had it delivered from Florida. This is about a $40,000 to $50,000 truck with the miles it had on it, and I got it for $8,500 and change. But someone was shot in the front seat and very apparently did not survive based on some brain matter on the headliner. It was cold and snowing when the truck got delivered, so I put it in my garage and was also pretty busy plowing during this time. From almost the entire time the truck was parked in my garage, I felt like someone was around. You know that feeling you get when someone is in the next room but they aren't making any noise? I finally started getting to strip out the parts with the blood and brain matter on them and putting them into bio bags. This is a very time-consuming process because you don't want to be flicking dried blood everywhere. So it took about 2 weeks to get it clean, where I would feel comfortable touching it without personal protective equipment. The interior was completely stripped besides the dash, and I had removed all the doors to make moving the seats out easier and to trash 2 of the doors that had holes in them. I remember this day like it was yesterday. I was in my garage working on the block heater to my daily driver, and I heard someone giggle. It sounded like a man. I live in a very, very rural area, so I don't have neighbors or hear anyone besides the mailman occasionally. So I thought my brother had stopped over and was screwing with me and hiding behind one of my trucks to sneak up on me after he came in the garage. I didn't hear the door open, though. I said, "John, come here, I need help with this cord." No response. I stood up after a second and looked and didn't see him. I walked to my only door into my garage, and it was still locked when I got close enough to see it. I knew I heard laughing, but I thought, weird, and brushed it off and went to return to my work. When I started to walk past the truck, I saw a man walk from behind it in blue jeans, a black short-sleeved shirt, and a blue hat sitting crooked on his head. He looked at me and nodded, then disappeared as he walked behind one of my plow trucks. I about fell over in fear. I knew 100% what I saw was not a hallucination. There was no gas leaks in my garage, no engines were running in there. I don't suffer from any delusions or mental health issues. I don't drink or do drugs. I even have pretty sensitive carbon monoxide alarms in my garage that start the minute you start one of the trucks. Literally not 30 seconds of idling and they start going off. I also have not moved any cars in over 2 hours, so any carbon monoxide that did generate when I moved my daily driver in had long been circulated out of the garage. I also had never had an issue with carbon monoxide, radon gas, or any type of electrical issues in my home before. It's my belief that I saw the owner of that truck that was killed. After I sold the truck, I never had that someone in the next room feeling in my garage anymore, after feeling that way for nearly 5 months while it sat in my garage. I didn't feel any type of negativity from seeing that man or being in the presence of the truck, just that strange feeling of being watched or someone being near me. Not sure why I saw him or why he nodded at me, but that experience will forever be in the back of my mind. I sold the truck to a guy I went to high school with. That was the only murder car I've ever sold as a whole. Usually part them out, so I was straight up with the buyer and told him someone was shot to death in it. He still has it to this day. I see him post pics of it on Facebook from time to time, and thankfully in none of those pictures have I seen our blue jean wearing friend. I've had experiences with mushrooms, LSD, and other stuff, so I know what a trip is and how wonderful they are. I'm also not religious at all. 30 years ago, I had an accident that resulted in me being transported to the hospital in an ambulance in a critical condition. I was dying for real. I was crying. I remember the words irregular heartbeat, and I just went to sleep. It was just dark for a while, I remember, and then it just transformed into a stunning forest full of ferns and big giant sequoia pines. I wasn't aware of my body anymore. It was a welcoming and positive feeling. I'll also skip some of the finer details and say I saw a path ahead. I knew it was just for me as it started where I was standing and went straight ahead and ended in a round area and was not there before. I was at the end and a light came down. It also brought the most intense feeling of unconditional love and understanding. I can't really put into words how this feeling and this emotion felt, because I don't think it exists here on Earth. I spoke to the entity in the light and I remember getting answers. I'm skipping details to keep it short. I woke up in the ICU sometime later, put into surgery and then in a hospital for a few weeks. When I got out, things got better, like total life reversal better. I felt inner peace, I think, and this drive. I got motivated, went back to high school as a mature age student, and went to college, lived life. I had no doubt from that day on that there was more after life. I have never tried to convince others or, be that dude. In fact, prior to this, I haven't said a word about it in 30 years. It was like a reserve I could draw on in life. So some 30 years later, I get to try DMT for the first time. I heard you communicated with entities in some way and that it was a really positive special experience. I packed a full cone full, unsure of how much to take. I had read about it for years and was really keen to go far. As I blew out the last toke, it was as if I could see all the atoms vibrating to make everything solid. I had to close my eyes. I'll skip some bits, but met 3 entities, communicated with all of them. Last 2 were special. Entity 2 was like a 2D form, very flat. There were others as well, but one came very close and I can still picture it in my head. We talked and it made a long rectangle box, and there were stripes that moved up and down it. I was somehow communicating some way with the being. and it slowly pushed the box into, I suppose, my right side, but I was not aware of having a body. Thing is, my mind felt clear, so I know I wasn't just tripping. Whatever this thing was, it loved me, it felt like. And this is some real stuff, I thought to myself. This next bit blew me away. The last entity I felt before I saw it, but when I did, I was overcome with emotions of happiness and joy. I'm 48 and think I have cried like 4 times in my adult life, but God, I just couldn't stop. It presented itself like a beautiful translucent shape filled with the living color purple or something inside it. When it did, I had the realization I'd known this entity for eternity. It was the same unconditional love and happiness feeling from the first experience, without a doubt. When we communicated, it said it was the same thing as when I was 18. And don't worry, this emotional feeling was just so intense. No hallucination I have had with drugs could convey meaning in the emotions like this being was doing. I've tripped lots on drugs, but this was communication on a higher level. I must sound crazy, but I had a straight mind, if that makes sense. No apparent cognitive effects from DMT. I accepted what I was being told when I saw the same forest again in my head, like, look, see, it was me. It was nuts. I had tears streaming down my face. I mean, my God, it must have looked crazy to my friend. I understood I had known this being forever. It was like we talked about old times together, and I have an image of like old boots and docks and ships. I got the impression that we had spent this time together in the past. It was the same being as when I died. There were tons more with this entity, but I'll leave it there. When the effects had worn off, there was the inner peace again. Worry had gone. It's like a refresh. It gave guidance. I was happier more now than I've ever been. I have no idea what it was all about, but I have no doubt it was the real deal. I sound nuts, but it was good for the soul. And the entity in DMT was the same as I experienced when I died, I believe. I'm a real estate agent. For privacy, I've changed the names of the clients, one of the few haunting type things I've experienced. My clients Jim and Pam have been looking for a home to buy for a while. We've seen a few houses that were in their price range, but didn't have the features they wanted. So when a home matching their requirements and price point popped up on the market, we were all more than motivated to give it all a look and hopefully make an offer. We scheduled a showing for 7 p.m. that evening. I didn't have much going on that day, so I got over there around 6:45 p.m., and since I still had 15 minutes before the buyers would get there, I decided to do a look through the house and also turn on lights, as it was getting dark and turning on lights for a showing is always a good idea. When I walk into the house, right away I notice it's fairly nice for the price it's at. Seems to be underpriced for at least $10,000, if not more, and that gets me excited. I know the buyers are going to want to make an offer, so I just have to make sure there's nothing super awful. As I make my way through the rooms, turning on lights, I come upon an intercom in a hallway next to the kitchen, press it and talk through it to hear the other receiver is directly below me in the basement. Very cool, as I've only seen intercoms in movies. Then I walk through the door frame into the kitchen. The counters and cupboards look nice but cheap, and then I notice the refrigerator is open. Must have had bad suction or something, left it open, I think to myself, and go over and shut it. I give it a little tug, but it seems sealed pretty well, so I figured someone from a previous showing left it open. Even though the refrigerator has nothing in it, still a little rude from the last agent not to do a once-over and shut it. As I mold this over, the intercom buzzes and static comes through. I slowly walk into the hallway as it continues, and a few steps away it cuts out. Must have electrical shortages or something downstairs. I haven't gone downstairs yet, so I figured I might as well go turn on the light and check and see what's going on with the intercom. The basement doesn't have a switch, just a pull string attached to a light in the middle of the room. The light from the outside is coming in through the small windows just enough so that I can see where I am going, but not much more. Before I can pull the light string, I hear the intercom buzz back on, but this time it's static through the basement receiver, so the interference is coming from upstairs now. Not really sure what's going on at this point, I turn on the light and run up the stairs. Again, the intercom stops as soon as I get close, but something in the kitchen catches my eye. I walk into the kitchen to find that every cupboard, drawer, and the refrigerator again is wide open. My heart sinks and the hairs on my neck stand. At this point, the scare was over, but the clients called to let me know that they had just arrived, 6:55-ish. This happened very quickly. I hurried, slammed everything shut, and tried to act normal for a bit. When I opened the door, Jim asked if I was feeling all right. I assume I was slightly pale, looked like you've seen a ghost type of appearance. We quickly walked through the house. Nothing open this time, and afterward, when I asked how they felt about the house, they both agreed that something felt off and dark about the house. I told them that I sensed that too, but didn't go into detail. Needless to say, we didn't write an offer, and I've never gone back. Definitely creeped me out, and definitely haunted. I can't sleep at all. It's making me mad, and it's entirely my own fault as well. I attend an extremely old college in Ireland. It was built in the 1700s as a seminary for Catholic priests during the collapse of the penal laws. It's now a generally secular institution, although it still has strong Catholic ties. I'm a believer in God from a Catholic family, but I wouldn't call myself Catholic. The college accepts all denominations, nationalities, and sexual orientations, so it's a generally great and community-driven place. I'm a history student, and during a recent class, we were told that our college was the site of a massacre of Irish rebels during the 1798 rebellion at the hands of the British. Some died on the front steps, others inside. I'm an idiot. I wanted to see if I could communicate with the spirits, which is both insensitive and plain dumb. But I did it, and experienced the worst fright of my life. The way the college is laid out is that when you enter, the dining room, library, and majority of lecture halls, student union building, meditation area, etc. are all located either straight ahead or to the right. The place is very Hogwartsian, and there are numerous stone steps leading everywhere. There's many stories to this building. It's very large, but the college population, inclusive of staff and students as well as daily visitors, is quite small. That means after 5 and 6 o'clock, it's often deserted save for a few people in the library. To the left of the entrance is a corridor leading to the old entrance hall. It's where the current chaplain and college president lives. In this hall is a gigantic old portrait that spans nearly the entire wall and a set of stone steps leading up several floors. I'm a student minoring in history and majoring in English, and I've always been attracted to the ghostly. After hearing about the 1798 rebellion incident, I decided to contact a few ghosts myself with a crappy app called Ghostbox E1 Spirit EVP. Do not use this app. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure if it was the app. It was kind of a piece of crap, but something very small did come through. So I'm just saying maybe I channeled a ghost by opening my mind to it. I don't know. I'm not very good about this sort of stuff and was hoping someone here will enlighten me. Only a few lecture halls are located up the stone steps, and they are generally not in use, but they are available for booking and so are left open. This was about 6 o'clock in the evening. I sat at one of the lecture desks overlooking the front lawns of the college, in a lecture hall which I gauged to be roughly above the steps of the old entrance where the people were killed. I tried for 4 or 5 minutes just asking the app different questions and nothing was coming through. It was raining and the room was getting kind of dark and I was creeped out a bit, but I wanted to have something to tell people. I was asking the usual, "Is anyone here?" etc. And eventually I got a very faint voice saying something. I listened again and it said something along the lines of Imahadiya 3 or 4 times. For anyone who doesn't speak Irish, Imahadiya means God is gone. For the record, this part might have just been my overactive imagination because I was creeped out in general. You have to remember that the priests would have been speaking Irish a lot at the time, but I hardly imagined them saying God is gone. I was packing up my bag out of fear when the door I had come through opened and slammed shut again. I froze. I couldn't move and my blood honestly felt like ice. I stood beside the desk for about a minute before I started leaving again. I made it through the door and out onto the landing and started walking down the stone steps. I was shaking with fear. Mind and my vision had gone all weirdly black with fright. When I was on the next landing down, ready to go onto the next stone steps, the door I had come through started violently banging over and over again, and there was a man screaming very, very loudly, the words incoherent, and I get the feeling he had a very strong Cary accent. Let me tell you, the scream was blood-curdling. My blood went substantially hot and cold. I don't know how exactly to describe it, but the door continued to slam until I reached the main entrance, and I could hear it through the halls. I was bawling, crying at this point, and shaking so bad I could hardly walk. I ran out the doors and onto the street and went and bought a soda and sat down until my bus time. I had planned to stay in the college until then, but I was too scared. I can't sleep ever since. This was a week or two ago, towards the end of the college year. Exams were over, etc., so at least I don't have to worry about those. I am working full-time for the summer, and it's the only time I stop thinking about it, when I'm surrounded by friends and coworkers. When I'm on my own, I can't stop thinking about it. I need to have blankets covering every part of my body when I sleep, even though I get too warm. I can't bear the thought of someone stroking the back of my head in the night. I have been so tired all the time and don't know what to do. My family and my supervisor are concerned. My mother, girlfriend, and some of my siblings are believers, but they generally don't understand the gravity of the situation. I don't like bothering them during the night either, and I can't do that every night. I agree I sound like I have psychological difficulties, but I can assure you I was perfectly sane before this. I don't feel like I am completely crazy, but I do miss sleep a lot, and I've been getting maybe 5 hours a night if I'm lucky. And generally I've been waiting until it gets bright at 4 and I have to work at 6. I can't keep going on like this. I'm going to need help. Has anyone had a similar experience? Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you'd like to get these stories a day earlier, be sure to join me on Patreon, where for only $1 or a donation of your choosing per month, you'll have early access to all audio on this channel 24 hours prior. I also hope to get into live streaming, where I'll be able to narrate stories live, play games with subscribers, and just generally get to know everyone through Q&A. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon.